Uhuru comrades, and welcome to today's Omali Taught Me Sunday Study webinar, where we'll be continuing this discussion around Russia's defensive war in Ukraine against the global colonial powers. Joining us today will be Chairman Omali Yeshitela. We'll have back with us live from Moscow, Alexander Ionov, President of the Anti-Globalization Movement of Russia. In London, we'll hear from Secretary General of the African Socialist International, Luwezi Kinshasa, and ASI Africa Regional Director of Organization, Tafarie Mugeri, in occupied Azania or South Africa. Now more than ever, it is important that you, our listeners, take a moment to like and share this video and tag someone you know to join this discussion. The global colonial powers are doing everything they can to make sure the only information you hear regarding this war is the position of the colonial capitalists themselves. Russia has been deplatformed by virtually every social media forum, and those of us in support of Russia who are offering our platforms face the same risk of whiteout censorship. It is important that you donate to this program, working hard to bring you this discussion at paypal.me/OmaliTaughtMe. This is the analysis they are trying to keep from you. So join us in being a contending force in the war of ideas. We'll start this discussion with the leader of the African nation and the worldwide African Revolution, who will be issuing the official position of the African Socialist International regarding Russia's defensive war in Ukraine. Uhuru, Chairman.
Uhuru, Comrade Director. I'm self-critical for my ineptitude in terms of being able to jump seamlessly, immediately to video and mic. But thank you so much for the introduction, and thank all of you comrades who've come on to this really critical discussion that we're having this morning. It's one of a series of discussions that we have initiated since Russia has found itself in the situation of fighting a defensive war that's being waged against it in Ukraine. The African People's Socialist Party does call for unity with Russia's defensive war in Ukraine against the world colonial powers. The February 2014 CIA-inspired or initiated and led coup in Ukraine was a crucial event contributing to Russia's defensive war being fought in Ukraine. However, the event most significant to this war was the invasion of Russia following the 1917 revolution that resulted in the establishment of a socialist state stemming from an international movement to destroy the global parasitic capitalist system. It was this invasion of Russia by all the colonial powers of the world, including the US and Japan, that the African People's Socialist Party recognizes as the critical event that should contribute to an African position of the current war being fought in Ukraine. This was the beginning of the colonial war against Russia that it is fending against today in its Ukrainian iteration. The invasion of Russia by colonial powers in 1918 was an invasion to protect the colonial mode of production that was begun with the attack on Africa more than 600 years ago. The threat of what would become Soviet Russia as revolutionary abettors and examples for the emancipation of workers and the oppressed of the world could not be tolerated by the colonialists. And I would remind everyone that the 19th invasion of Russia did not occur in a vacuum. The meaning of our definition of the colonial mode of production that Russia, independent of its will, was fighting against is crystallized by the fact that the invasion of Russia was initiated by the colonial powers during the same time of the 11 million strong anti-colonial Garvey movement stretching around the globe, demanding Africa for Africans at home and abroad. It was the time frame of Pancho Villa and Emiliano Zapata's revolutionary, anti-colonial revolutionary work in Mexico and the Sandinista National Liberation Front in Nicaragua. In 1915, just 3 years before the invasion of Russia by all of these colonial powers, this was the year that the United States Marines invaded Haiti and stole all the gold in its treasury and forced the Haitian government at gunpoint to change its constitution, allowing whites to own land for the first time since its 1804 revolution. Of course, all this colonial aggression by the United States was a normal reflex for a country that was itself founded as a settler colony, no different than South Africa and Israel, a country whose economy was built on stolen indigenous land and stolen African labor, earning its special place within the colonial mode of production, defined by the same means and relations of production globally that are reflected domestically in the United States. This was the basis and context for the United White Nationalist invasion of Russia in 1918 and the ongoing economic quarantine intended to break the back of the Soviet state. This is also the basis for the 1949 creation of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO, which was explicitly created to contain and crush Soviet Russia. I think it's important to make this point because all of this noise about this democratic war by Europe against Russia is exposed to anybody who understands that as a fallacy, as a lie, by anybody who understands that NATO was created explicitly for the purpose of attacking Russia. In 1949, the existing world order, led since 1949 by the international colonialist bloc known as the Atlanticists, achieved its current political and economic anti-Russia configuration during this period of the 1940s. In the 1980s, the US government under the regime of James Earl Carter, with the leadership of Zbigniew Brzezinski, his national security advisor, drew the Soviet Union into a military conflict in Afghanistan to overthrow its government that was allied with Soviet Russia and to extend NATO's border closer to Soviet encirclement. A host of so-called color revolutions and related struggles, aided by opportunism, the desire to join the white colonial world of Europe and the US in partaking the flesh of the colonized, and to experience the standards of life common to other white people to our disadvantage, has led to the expansion of NATO to now include 30 different countries arrayed against Russia. Since the 1991 dissolution of the Soviet Union, the US has escalated its efforts to contain Russia. According to one online source, Since the dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991, the NATO military alliance has extended its borders 800 miles to the east, incorporating Poland, Hungary, Czechia, Bulgaria, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Romania, Slovakia, Slovenia, Croatia, Montenegro, and North Macedonia. In 2021, NATO officially recognized Ukraine itself as an aspiring member, and Sweden and Finland are also considering joining the anti-Russia alliance. I just want to really draw our attention to the fact that all these forces who are joining the so-called anti-Russian alliance, what they're doing in effect is joining on the side of the colonizers. They are fighting to have the same kind of life chances, life situations, living standards that have become normal for white people, except for those people who were quarantined because of a relationship with the Soviet Union. And so those people who are now free from that relationship, they're free to join in with the other white countries to suck the blood of Black people and of colonized peoples around the world to participate in economy with this foundation on that. So while many have been forced to recognize the existence of colonialism as it relates to individual countries, the African People's Socialist Party has determined that the initial 15th century European colonization begun in Africa developed into a mode of production itself, a colonial mode of production that continues to define the political landscape of the world. Western European white colonial identity and the existing colonial mode of production enveloping the world were achieved during this period. Unlike most of Europe, Russia developed from feudalism, Russian development from feudalism did not go through the colonial mode of production, but is a product of the Russian socialist-led revolution of 1917. This is why Russia today, although it makes no pretense of being communist or revolutionary, has been able to briefly enter into the colonial mode of production on its own terms, free from the absolute dictates of the United States. Under the leadership of Vladimir Putin, Russia has become an active, aggressive opponent of the unipolar world domination of the United States. And this confounds and challenges the strategic equilibrium of the colonial mode of production, contributing to the crisis made manifest within the United States domestically, and fracturing US-dominated hegemonic unity of the Atlanticist globally. The 2014 CIA engineered coup to put a puppet in power in Ukraine on Russia's western border, along with the imposition of a puppet government and fascist-filled military and the murder of an estimated 13,000 ethnic Russian Ukrainians in the 8 years since the coup, was the beginning of a comprehensive intensification of the 100-year-long war against Russia that has resulted in the existential defensive war being fought by Russia against the global colonial ruling class and its minions. Thus, it is absolutely necessary for Africans and all the victims of European colonialism to take a definitive stance in solidarity with Russia, which, independent of its own consciousness, is fighting against the power of colonial slavery that has dominated the world of Africa and Africans for 600 years. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman, we really want to just appreciate this really definitive position that African people must take in regards to Russia's defensive war in Ukraine. And, it's just really important that African people are able to have a position that reflects our own interests in the context of this entire struggle, which has, implications for the rest of the world, not just where the struggle is happening. So really just want to appreciate this statement. Comrade President Alexander Ionov of the Anti-Globalization Movement of Russia just joined us now live from Russia. So I just want to welcome Comrade President Alexander Ionov to this discussion. And just to bring you up to speed, Comrade, the chairman just read the official position of the African Socialist International around Russia's defensive war in Ukraine against the global colonial powers. And I know you have had an opportunity to see this position. And so we wanted to just take a moment for you to respond, President Alex, to the position put forward by Chairman Omali Yeshitela. So Uhuru, Comrade Alex.
Uhuru, Sasha.
Uhuru, comrades, Omali, Uhuru, comrades who enjoy for this conference call. I'm really appreciated work with this meeting. Really thank you so much for your support us. Thank you so much, Omali. Thank you so much, the all activists from Uhuru movement.
Uhuru, thank you again for joining us. And I want to take this opportunity, and I know your translator's on with us as well, if you could respond to the position statement that the chairman just put forward, and also update us on the current situation with Russia and Ukraine, because there has been a lot that has happened within this past week. So if you could also give us an update.
Значит, ты мог бы во-первых, рассказать, чего нового там получилось, то, что было много изменений по Украине, а во-вторых, ответить на то, о чем сейчас говорил Omali.
Во-первых, я хотел бы еще раз поблагодарить всех, кто сегодня дал нам эту трибуну для того, чтобы выступить перед активистами. И я приветствую всех, кто сегодня борется за права свободных народов.
I welcome everyone, and I thank too much Chairman Omali Yeshitela and the authors who helped this meeting to come through, authors who struggle for the freedom of people.
На сегодняшний день действительно ситуация остается сложной и тяжелой.
Up to this date, the situation is complicated.
Но есть и новые информационные прорывы, даже в Соединенных Штатах.
But there are new successes even in informational area, even in the United States.
Недавно, несколько дней назад, американская журналистка Fox News заявила, что в Америке беспрецедентная пропаганда по освещению украинского кризиса и отстаиванию интересов американских империалистов.
Just before some days, Fox News journalist said that it's unprecedented level of propaganda in United States media, standing by interest of U.S. imperialists.
И мы не видели такого единения американского общества, когда десятки и сотни тысяч людей в Сирии, Йемене, Ливии и других странах умирали под натовскими бомбами.
We did not see such incredible, astonishing union of American nation, of all different American directions, when there were bombs falling in Syria or Libya or Yemen, and NATO bombs, in fact.
И мы стоим перед новым витком сегрегации.
And we are approaching a new era of segregation.
Превосходство белой расы над всеми остальными народами.
Like superiority of white race over all other people.
Потому что украинцы сегодня для Америки это нация, на которую стоит обратить внимание, но люди из Африки, стран Ближнего Востока для них являются второсортными и никакой поддержки или помощи им не оказывается. Единственная помощь, которую они оказывают, это помощь бомбами.
Because for American media, for American leaders, well, there are Ukrainians whom are representative of this superior white race, and all other nations like Arab nations, like Asian nations, like African nations, well, they are just cannon fodder, something to be killed.
Более 7 тысяч студентов из африканских стран, азиатских стран, из Индии остаются на сегодняшний день в заложниках у украинских националистов. И в Америке, и на трибунах ООН не звучат призывы освободить и переместить в безопасное место этих людей.
Up to this date, little over 7,000 students from African countries, from India, from Asian countries, and they are all up now, like 3 weeks into conflict, almost a month. They are still hostages in the hands of Ukrainian armed forces, and we don't hear anywhere in United Nations, we don't hear in Western media, we don't hear in European media anything, any calls to make them free.
И американская пропаганда сегодня коснулась и американские антивоенные и левые организации, что вызывает очень большую обеспокоенность.
Today, U.S. imperialist propaganda has touched all various groups, anti-war groups, leftist groups in United States, and we are really concerned about it.
Они все больше начинают верить в то, что Россия является агрессором в этом конфликте, и именно Россия развязала войну на Украине, хотя кризис там продолжался на протяжении 8 лет, и они прекрасно об этом знали, что война шла с 2014 года, но при этом сегодня они начинают обвинять в начале этого конфликта Россию.
They all know all too much well that this war has been held for over 8 years, and it started in 2014, and they were witnesses, and they actually were supportive against it, against this war, but right now they begin to believe more and more that Russia is just an aggressor who suddenly decided to occupy neighbor country.
А делается это потому, что на организации оказывается беспрецедентное давление со стороны американских спецслужб.
It is done because these organizations are unprecedentedly pressed by United States Special Intelligence Services,
Которые в совокупности с американской пропагандой делают свое дело и развязывают руки тем движениям и организациям, которые, по сути, выступают за белое превосходство, потому что поддержка националистов на Украине, поддержка украинской армии – это поддержка Ку-клукс-клана на сегодняшний день.
Basically, by providing their support to Ukrainian nationalists, they are building a new bridge with nationalists in United States. Basically, they give a word today in order to stand with Ukrainian leaders. They give a word. They give ability for KKK members to rise from somewhat we saw as ashes, rise again, and it will start from something small like Ukraine, and who knows where it can lead us.
В России сейчас активно в Инстаграме и Фейсбуке распространяется видео Арнольда Шварценеггера, где он говорит о своем опыте взаимодействия с Россией и говорит о том, что мы напали на Украину и убиваем там невинных людей.
There is a video all over social media with Arnold Schwarzenegger, and he is saying that about how he deals with Russia, and he says how Russia attacked Ukraine and killing innocent people there.
Это выглядит абсолютно диссонансно, и Шварценеггер выглядит сумасшедшим старым мужиком, который не может, видимо, пользоваться компьютером и открыть статьи американской прессы за 2019-2020 года и предыдущие все 8 лет, когда очень многие американские издания, ведущие издания писали о том, что на Украине большое количество националистических батальонов, которые ведут свою боевую деятельность на территории Донецких и Луганских республик.
And Arnold Schwarzenegger really looks senile with this statement because, well, if he just open press media like papers for 2019 American papers, he will see so many articles dedicated to how this ultra-nationalist forces are forming into military units, and these units are used to kill people since years in Donbass region.
У меня просто один вопрос, который может решить любой первоклассник.
I just have one question, and any child could answer it.
Как назвать тех людей, которые сегодня поддерживают украинскую власть?
How do you call these people who support Ukrainian people today? Who support Ukrainian leaders today?
Если мы берем американскую даже прессу и читаем там по националистов, которые бомбили Донецк и Луганск, в том числе запрещенным оружием.
If we take Western media and read about articles about this nationalists who were bombing Donetsk and Lugansk, including using prohibited weapon.
Если мы берем студентов, которых сегодня удерживают националисты в заложниках,
if we see these students captured as hostages by nationalists today,
то у меня складывается вопрос, кого поддерживает Шварценеггер и те люди, которые его попросили сделать это обращение.
Whom Schwarzenegger is supporting, and whom supporting people who pushing this agenda.
Я не понимаю, почему люди не воспринимают слова Шварценеггера как попытку оправдать национализм и радикальное правое движение в США.
I don't understand why people cannot correlate Schwarzenegger's words with supporting Ukrainian nationalism with tries to justify nationalistic and radical views in the United States.
И до этого не нужно даже слушать сегодняшнюю конференцию, до этого достаточно открыть интернет и там найти сотни тысяч доказательств тому, кто сегодня находится у власти на Украине и кто составляет авангард их вооруженных сил. Я сейчас говорю про националистические батальоны.
So it's not necessary to listen to this our conversation today. Even anybody could just Google it, and he will see from what sort of people consist current Ukrainian leadership, and what kind of people are fighting there against Russia.
Я обращаюсь к международному движению ХУРу, к Африканской социалистической партии и другим организациям.
I'm calling for International Movement of Uhuru and African Socialist Party and other organizations.
Даже если сегодня мы не будем рассматривать этот кризис как кризис и войну на Украине, то я призываю вас рассмотреть эту ситуацию с точки зрения высоких тенденций в сторону правых организаций. Я призываю вас выйти на улицы для того, чтобы высказать свой протест против набирающих обороты правой риторики на территории Соединенных Штатов. Мы должны сегодня поддерживать движение интернационализма, мы должны сегодня поддерживать движение африканцев и латиноамериканцев, которые живут в Соединенных Штатах, особенно после митингов БЛМ. И сегодняшняя поддержка Украины – это абсолютно противоположное БЛМ движению.
I urge you to see whatever happens today, not in context of war in Ukraine, but in context of rise to power, ultra-nationalistic, ultra-right movements all along the United States. And well, basically, this is the enemy for Black Lives Matter movement. And they are getting power now through this prism of Ukrainian nationalism. I urge you to take it, to understand it, and to take this protest to the streets.
Однажды мой близкий друг и учитель сорвал российский плакат в Сити-холле, за что был наказан, но это было проявлением его воли, его идей. И им было Omali Yeshitela, за что я бескрайне его уважаю и рассказываю о нем в России и во всех своих зарубежных поездках. И сегодня праворадикальные организации в Америке находят новые плацдармы для своего развития, используя украинский кризис. И сегодня мы должны сделать то, что сделал Omali много лет назад.
Once before, my closest friend and mentor, Omali, removed this flag, ultranationalistic flag, and I was like...
Not flag, the banner.
Как баннер где?
В Сити-холле. Banner in City-hall.
Banner from the City Hall, and I was really inspired by what he had done, and I urge you people to repeat it and not let these ultranationalist forces to capture United States and to return it to maybe over a century before.
Когда Байден был вице-президентом, он прилетел на Украину отстаивать интересы своего сына, Хантера Байдена.
When Biden was президентом или вице-президентом?
Вице-президентом.
When Biden was vice president, he went to Ukraine to fight for the interest of his son, Hunter Biden.
Хантер Байден входил в тесные отношения с украинской компанией Burisma.
Burisma?
Burisma, да. Ну, так компания
Hunter Biden is was working closely with Ukrainian company Burisma.
Вы можете почитать об этом в интернете, об этом много написано.
You can read about it online.
И Байден тогда узнал, что в отношении Бурисмы и его сына генеральный прокурор Украины возбудил уголовное дело за махинации.
Found out that against him, General Prosecutor of Ukraine has initiated a criminal case for fraud.
И когда Байден прилетел на Украину, он сказал: мы выделим помощь Украине в размере $1 миллиарда только тогда, когда генеральный прокурор, который возбудил дело в отношении Хантера Байдена, будет уволен со своего поста, а все дела в отношении его сына и компании Болисма будут закрыты. И так случилось. Генеральный прокурор был уволен за взятку в $1 миллиард, которые США дали украинскому режиму Порошенко.
So basically, Biden said that we'll only get back and help you Ukrainian leaders when this general prosecutor will be fired. And so that happened. He was arrested for a bribe of $1 billion from United States government that he received for help to Ukraine.
Поэтому вся помощь, которая сегодня выделяется Украине, в том числе и средства американских налогоплательщиков, разворовывается киевским режимом и не идет людям.
So all this money U.S. government is spending, this money of American taxpayers, and they don't go to the people of Ukraine. They actually go to the pockets of modern Ukrainian leadership.
Подводя итог.
So finally,
я был много раз в Донецке и Луганске.
I have visited Donetsk and Lugansk for a number of times.
Я участвовал в референдуме в Крыму.
I participated in referendum in Crimea.
Я знаю всю ситуацию изнутри и знаю реальное количество людей, которые пострадали от киевской власти.
I know the situation from inside, and I know this large amount of people who were hurt by Ukrainian authorities.
И то, что сегодня американская пропаганда, по сути, оправдывает праворадикальные движения и дает возможность правым и ультраправым организациям выступать в США под лозунгом защиты мира на Украине, ведет лишь к большей тотализации и реваншу за митинги БЛМ. Поэтому я призываю вас дать отпор тому, что сегодня происходит в Соединенных Штатах.
And today, U.S. rhetoric in support of Ukrainian nationalists, basically it opens the door for the same nationalists in the United States, and basically strikes everything BLM movement had done up now. I urge you to protest against it. Thank you.
Uhuru, President Alex from the Anti-Globalization movement of Russia, thank you so much for, again, being on with us and this profound statement that you're making right live from Moscow. And Chairman, before we move further in the discussion, I just wanted to see if you had anything you wanted to say based on what President Alex just delivered.
One thing I would say is that the U.S. is not being as successful as it may appear in terms of convincing the world to unite with them against Russia. As you know, almost half the countries in Africa at the United Nations refused to condemn Russia. And other countries are taking similar positions, even if they are too afraid to come out in support of Russia, they're refusing to join the condemnation of Russia. And we see Africans in the United States and other places, not just the United States, but in Africa, in Europe and the Caribbean, we see many Africans who are saying that Russia never enslaved Africans. Russia did not participate in the 1884 partition of Africa that was done by Europe. The European so-called West, the colonial powers did that. and that Russia's history, generally speaking, in relationship to Africa, and many of the oppressed peoples around the world, even if it was done, although it was done, much of it from the Soviet state, they have been supporters of Africa and the colonized of the world. So I think that increasingly you should understand that more and more people are seeing Ukraine and NATO functioning as a kind of lynch mob, a white man's army that is attempting to protect the global system of colonial slavery, and that Russia represents a problem for them in doing that. So I think you should really understand that there is not the kind of unity with the US that may seem to be the case right now. I don't know how many people even listen to Arnold Schwarzenegger. I think that the people who do that are people who would be opposed to Russia under any circumstances. These are white nationalists that we are looking at. Schwarzenegger is a white nationalist, and America is a white nationalist country. So it is itself a settler colony. How can America condemn Russia for the defensive war that it is making in Ukraine when it is established on stolen land of the indigenous people with an economy that was created by the stolen labor of Africans and other people? I just wanted to make that statement, and that's a statement speaking to the reality, the objective reality, and that favors Russia, even though it may not be obvious right now. The history of the West, the history of the United States is something that works in Russia's favor. And so you should really be aware of that. Uhuru. Sasha.
Uhuru, Chairman. Uhuru, thank you. So we're gonna move to our next question. And this is, Chairman, to give our audience a little more background. And we're wanting you to talk about when you were invited to Moscow in 2015 to represent Africa at the Dialogue of Nations, the Right to Self-Determination, and the Construction of a Multipolar World Conference, and the significance of your being there.
Thank you so much. This is when I first met Sasha, Alex. He invited me. In fact, this shirt that I'm wearing, I'm sorry you cannot see it, is the Russian writing there is one that I got during that time while I was in Russia. It was a really important conference. I met people from around the world who were invited to Russia in 1915 as a part of a global movement speaking to the question of self-determination. I met people who were there from Syria, from Armenia, from various other places around the world who were also seeking liberation. And Russia had provided for us an opportunity to come together, to see what we could do to unite the struggle that we're involved in. I met people from Ukraine who were there. And I had looked forward to going to Ukraine as a consequence of meeting the people from Ukraine who were there at that meeting in Moscow. So it was really impressive to me. And it was also impressive because while I was there, I was reminded that Paul Robeson, who had been an extraordinary fighter for the rights of the people, African man, who was born and lived in the United States, had been to Russia. And in fact, he was poisoned while in Russia. He was by CIA agents. He had been given some kind of drink that affected his ability to perform as an activist in the United States. But I also went to the square of Alexander Pushkin, extraordinary African man who is renowned in Russia as one of the most important literary figures in Russia, Black man. I mean, I bought a portrait, a painting of Alexander Pushkin while I was there. I listened while in the subways in Moscow. Extraordinary, most beautiful thing you can ever, you should go to this. Everybody, for no other reason, go to Moscow to go to this incredibly beautiful subway. And it's been there for a long period of time. And I heard Paul Robeson singing over the system there, the International, and he was singing in Russian. So this is Russia. And I've met the Russian people, and I've heard how people say that the Russians don't have any rights. I was in Russia and I've seen demonstrations in Russia who were protesting against something that they thought the Russian government had done wrong. So, I mean, most of what we in the United States and other places who rely on information from the United States hear about Russia, their lies, and certainly everything that we hear regarding this defensive war that Russia has been forced to fight for its life is a lie. So I was quite pleased with this opportunity to be in Russia, Moscow, and I was there on at least 2 different occasions, and was going to go the 3rd occasion, and I was going to go to the Donbass region, except the COVID stopped all movement, airline movement, et cetera, and made it impossible to do. So I was really pleased to meet Russians, to go to restaurants with Russians, to go to supermarkets with Russians, to go to marketplaces, and just to meet with Russians. So I wanted to say that because if you listen to the media coming from the United States, you would think of Russians as 2-headed monsters and things like that, and it's quite the opposite. And the attitude of the Russians were quite different because they are not attitudes that were born, that came from or developed from slavery and colonialism like you find in the so-called West, where the colonialism and slavery has its origin, and that continues to dominate the consciousness of white people here now. That's why you see the white left, the so-called leftists in the United States, they are white nationalists. They are like most of them are like colonialist leftists. They are left colonizers, and they're not, generally speaking, able to unite against the oppression of the peoples of the world, including unite with Russia in this defensive war that is fighting against the United States through Ukraine. Uhuru.
Uhuru, thank you so much, Chairman, for just that background. And I think it's really important, what you're saying about how Russia has been depicted, throughout the world for years. I mean, I remember just being in school and how Russia has always been portrayed, and even in socialism and communism, how all of these things were the most terrible thing you could associate yourself with. And then it wasn't until coming into political life that you recognize the significance of Russia. So I just really want to appreciate you, talking about that and giving us this background, and also how we came into a relationship with President Alexander and Russia. So,
let me just say, Comrade Director, that the U.S. and the West cannot claim that they're fighting against Russia now in the fight against communism. They can't make that claim today. They're fighting for Russia now, though, for the same reason they invaded Russia in 1917. Because in 1917, Russia was independent of the colonial powers of the world. And today, under President Putin, Russia has remained independent of the colonial powers of the world. And Putin has struggled to put Russia on a path in its own interest, as opposed to being in the interest of the Western colonial powers. So they don't even say anymore they're fighting against communism. But for 105 years now, since the invasion in 1918, 104 years, they have been making consistent war against Russia. And this is just the latest iteration of that war.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Chairman. President Alex, did you want to respond to what we talked with about the chairman regarding the Dialogue of Nations conference that the chairman was invited to? Let me go ahead and do
that. Я хочу сказать очень важную вещь. Во-первых, я благодарю еще раз господина комрада Omali за его визит тогда в Россию, и он не раз посещал нашу страну, и мы всегда открыты для посещения любых товарищей из интернационального движения УХУРу и Африканской социалистической партии.
First of all, thank you, Comrade Omali. Thank you for your support and thank you for being with us. We are always happy to see you here, and in fact, we are happy to see everyone from Uhuru movement and from African Party.
Я хочу сейчас обратиться всем, кто смотрит эту конференцию и посмотрит ее в записи в социальных сетях.
And I want to address now to people who are watching this conference and to people who will be watching it later in social networks.
Особенно к тем организациям, которые, как и антиглобалистское движение, и движение УХУ, являются левыми организациями.
Especially to organizations whom like Anti-Globalization movement of Russia and Uhuru movement are in fact left organizations.
У России есть два исторических символа.
Russia has two historic symbols.
И эти символы остались даже несмотря на распад Советского Союза.
Even though the Soviet Union has fallen, but the symbols are still symbols of Russia.
Первый – это официальный государственный символ после флага России.
It's official state symbol.
Это знамя победы, которое было установлено над фашистским Рейхстагом после победы в Великой Отечественной войне.
First one is a flag of victory that was installed over Reichstag when fascism was defeated in 1945.
На нем изображен серп и молот и название дивизии, которая первая зашла в Рейхстаг.
You can see there sickle and the hammer and the name of the division who first got into Reichstag.
И второй символ, он больше символ народный.
Another symbol is more like people's symbol.
Это то, что у Omali на пилотке это звезда с серпом и молотом.
Is what Omali has on his hat right now. This star, red star with sickle and the hammer.
Так вот, я вам сейчас скажу интересную вещь.
So I'll tell you something interesting now.
В рамках закона о декоммунизации, который был принят на Украине в 2014 году,
by the law of decommunization that was adopted in Ukraine in 2014.
Вы можете посмотреть это в интернете, опять же, я не вру.
You can look it up online.
Если Omali вот в таком виде пойдет по улицам Киева, его могут задержать и посадить до 15 лет в тюрьму.
If Omali walks like this in the streets of Kiev, he will most likely be arrested and put into jail for over 15 years.
И теперь я обращаюсь к левым организациям, которые, я вижу некоторых, кто поддерживает сегодня украинцев, украинскую власть.
So I'm addressing to the left organizations right now. I see so many of them supporting Ukrainian leadership today.
когда они уже откажутся от идей Маркса, Энгельса и Мао и повыкидывают свои красные флаги, потому что они на сегодняшний день никакого отношения к левым организациям не имеют. Они смело могут брать в руки фашистскую свастику либо флаги Ку-клукс-клана и уже выходить с ними на улицы и не портить, и не, так сказать, оскорблять символы левого движения и интернационала во всем мире. Потому что если сегодня они выходят с флагами в поддержку Зеленского, то они должны выходить с теми флагами, которые были у фашистской Германии или у фашистской Италии, но не трогать символы, которые были в коммунистическом Китае и в коммунистическом Советском Союзе, потому что на Украине они запрещены, и вас за это посадят.
So I suggest all this so-called leftist movements that, well, in fact, up now marching with Soviet-era flags and communist protest symbols and stuff like that, I suggest them all to throw it away and just, use symbols for white supremacy, because symbols that they are carrying today are in fact something they can easily get arrested for in Ukraine, because Ukraine today is against, it's against communism, it's against people who defeated fascism, it's all for people who in fact fought for fascism.
И как только они выйдут с флагами праворадикальных организаций, пусть они вспомнят, что в 1945 году эти флаги были кинуты на брусчатку Красной площади перед мавзолеем, как знамена поверженных фашистских дивизий.
And whenever they will went outside with this flag of, ultranationalists, this new flag I should suggest they use from now on, they should remember what happened to this the flags of Nazi Germany when they were thrown on this pavement in front of Mausoleum in 1945. That will be their destiny, ultimately.
Поэтому сегодня мы должны объединяться и нанести ответный удар в отношении тех сил, которые пытаются оправдать праворадикальные организации путем осуждения военного кризиса.
Today we should unite, we should strike back, we should clarify it for everyone who did not understand it yet, and who is justifying ultra-nationalistic, ultra-right organizations under the guise of Ukrainian war.
Сегодня получается ситуация, которая была похожа на никарагуанского диктатора Сомосу, когда президенту Соединенных Штатов сказали о том, что Сомоса диктатор и убил 700 тысяч своих человек, но американцы его поддерживают. Американский президент сказал: Сомоса хоть и сукин сын, но он наш сукин сын. И вот сегодняшний Сомоса — это Зеленский.
Because today Zelensky basically repeats the history as Somoza did before him, when US president was asked that Somoza killed over 700,000 people, and how is this possible? And this US president answered that, okay, sure, he's SOB, but he's our SOB. Ours.
Спасибо.
Thank you.
Girl, thank you, President Alex. Chairman, before we move, did you want to add anything?
Only thing I wanted to add is that as comrades in the Uhuru movement are aware that we participated in demonstrations and protests that was encouraged by the anti-globalization movement, supported by the anti-globalization movement that Comrade Alex leads. We have the banner of the anti-globalization movement that we have displayed prominently because we wanted the world to know that we were in solidarity with Russia against the aggressions being made by the traditional colonial white powers of the world, including the United States. I have seen in Moscow the Communist Party of Russia. The Communist Party of the United States is invisible. I mean, and that's reality. And Russia doesn't pretend to be a communist country or anything like that, but I'm just saying something about the rights of the people in Russia, as compared to the stories that are told here about Russia. I have been to the Museum of the Great Patriotic War that is in Moscow. And I've seen pictures and other symbols of Russian heroism that broke the back of Nazi Germany. And it is the fact that it was Russia that defeated the Nazis. I have seen pictures of Russians who were fighting in Ukraine against Nazis and fascism and what have you, and fought for Ukraine during the Great Patriotic War. And this is something that most people don't understand. And the fact is that the informational quarantine of Russia did not start with this war, did not start with Ukraine. It has been one that's going on for more than 100 years. I have, on one occasion when I was in prison for my political work, and I was transferred from one prison to another, I had a book by a Russian named Dostoevsky, and who was by no means a communist or anything like that, but they took the book from me. This was in the 1960s because it was done by a Russian. And Russians in the United States and other places now are running into the same kinds of problems precisely because they're Russian. And so this propaganda against Russia extends beyond just the war, but Russian people are being targeted in various places in the free world, in the colonial world. And the fact of the matter is that this leftist that Comrade Tasha is talking about, this left that supports Ukraine is the same left that Lenin was criticizing more than 100 years ago. It's the same left. It's an opportunist left. It's a colonial-based left. So it's nothing new with how this left is acting in the United States or in much of Europe. This left supported French colonialism. At the same time, the French claimed to be fighting against colonialism, fascism in the 1940s. They were oppressing and killing Black people in Algeria, and they continue to control something like 15 different countries in Africa today under colonialism. And the communists of those countries supported that. They worked with that. So there's a difference in a struggle against colonialism. If you don't understand that, the entire foundation of so-called Western civilization rests upon colonial domination of Black people and other oppressed peoples around the world. That's why we stand with Russia.
Chairman, well, along those lines, we'll go ahead and go into our next question.
Please do.
Yes, which, as you said, in the official position of African people uniting with Russia, you speak about the historical basis for this defensive war beginning in 1917. You've mentioned that Russia did not participate in the dividing up of Africa and the theft of our resources as the colonial European powers did. Why is this important as a basis for your support? That's to you, Chairman.
I'm sorry, would you repeat that? I was just looking at a message here.
Oh,
and
okay.
this message says, Uhuru, I really want to salute our chairman and welcome our Russian comrade, Alexander. There's not much to add here. I just want to share an observation. It's so interesting that with all the anti-Russian vitriol historically coming out of the US, it was Russia that gave asylum to Edward Snowden. Interestingly, despite being a white American that was undoubtedly indoctrinated with the anti-Russian views peddled by the United States, he knew that Russia was the safest place for him to flee to after disclosing to the world the atrocities committed by the United States and the colonial powers. I stand with Russia. Uhuru. This is a message in the chat right now. So I think it's really worth acknowledging. So what were you saying, Comrade Akile?
Uhuru, Chairman. Yeah, I was just saying, and this question really is to bring us to the conclusions that we've come to, particularly around the colonial mode of production. But it was stating that in your official position of African people uniting with Russia, you speak about the historical basis for this defensive war beginning in 1917. You've mentioned that Russia did not participate in the dividing up of Africa and the theft of our resources as the colonial European powers did. And why is this important as a basis for our support for Russia?
Uhuru, I think that's an important question because I'm not sure whether even Russians understand this history. At the same time, of the revolution in 1917, for struggling for the workers of the world, the movement, the Universal Negro Improvement Association of Marcus Garvey, with more than 11 million African people around the world, was challenging the same system that Russia was challenging at that moment. And they arrested so many people who were part of that movement. They arrested the leader, Marcus Garvey, and kicked him out of the US. At the same time this was going on, revolution was happening in Mexico against colonialism. It was happening in Nicaragua against colonialism. And it's interesting because the same colonialism that was being fought in Mexico and that was being fought in Nicaragua is being fought today. And the same Nicaragua is being targeted by US imperialism right now as we have this discussion, as is Russia. So there is an obvious connection with the Russian Revolution of 1917 and the anti-colonial explosion that was happening in the rest of the world. They are part and parcel of the same historical process. And they're part and part of the same historical process because the entire social system that dominates the world has its foundation on colonialism. And Russia was a critical part of that struggle against colonialism. And what has happened is after years and years and years of the so-called West isolating Russia, preventing it from coming into the world economy for years and years and years, depriving the Russian people of the right to have the kinds of resources that other countries were having precisely because Russia was friendly to the oppressed of the world. That's why Russia was attacked then. And so we stand with that historical trajectory moving toward freedom. We're saying that past, that NATO is fighting for the past. Ukraine is a part of the war for the past. And the past is that of colonial domination of the peoples of the world. And Russia, I don't know what President Putin has in his brains or not. I think President Putin is fighting to prevent Russia from becoming a colony itself of the Western powers. But Russia, even in fighting in its own interests, is objectively speaking on the side of the oppressed of the world. Right now, that is the truth. And that's why we stand with Russia. It's not even a hard question for us. It's an easy question for us. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman. President Alex, did you want to respond before we move on to the next part of this discussion?
Comment, Alex. Let me just say this, comment, Achille, this is what's really important to understand. Colonialism created the white man. There was no such thing as the white man before colonial slavery. And the Europeans that were involved in colonial slavery, they are the white people of the world. And they assume the right to dominate the peoples of the world. This is what has helped to make Russia different. And I don't know, again, how President Putin or even Comrade Tasha understands this, but that's just an objective reality that we're confronted with. Uhuru.
Я хотел сказать достаточно коротко очень важную вещь.
I wanted to say something shortly, but it's very important.
Основными колониалистами были европейцы и американцы.
Main colonialists were Europeans and Americans.
Кто сегодня поехал добровольцем воевать за Зеленского?
Who went as a volunteer to fight for Zelensky today?
Европейцы и американцы.
The same Europeans and Americans.
Кто поехал воевать сегодня и хочет поехать воевать добровольцем за Россию?
Who wants to come and fight for Russia today?
Это открытая информация.
It's open information.
5000 африканцев из Центральной Африканской Республики.
5,000 Africans from Central African Republic.
5000, около 5000 эфиопов.
Around 5,000 from Ethiopia.
Около 2000 венесуэльцев.
Around 2,000 from Venezuela.
Около 2000 людей из Никарагуа.
Around 2,000 from Nicaragua.
И кубинцы.
And Cubans.
Но при этом американские организации, которые называют себя левыми и должны, наоборот, работать со странами Альбы и с африканцами, поддерживают почему-то украинскую сторону.
At the same time, American left organizations, for some reason, supporting Ukrainian leadership, which is nationalistic and not left in any way.
Но эти организации должны помнить.
But these organizations must remember.
Что для каждого Троцкого найдется свой ледокол, ледоруб.
For each Trotsky, there is an icebreaker.
Спасибо.
Thank you.
What was that for each what? There's an icebreaker. What was that?
Повтори про Троцкого.
Что для каждого Троцкого найдется свой ледоруб.
For each Trotsky, there is an icebreaker.
Okay, I understand. Trotsky was assassinated in Mexico with an ice pick hammer. He was killed with an ice pick. So yeah, this is the analogy that's being drawn here. But am I hearing Comrade Tasha say that there are Cubans and Central Africans and Ethiopians who are fighting with Ukraine, with Zelensky?
Ты правильно слышишь, что эфиопы, кубинцы и африканцы воюют против Зеленского?
Да, да.
Yes.
Yes. The CIA used Cubans to hunt down and help kill Che Guevara. There's a whole nest of Cuban reactionaries. In fact, Miami, Florida, I heard Miami, Florida referred to as the Republic of reactionaries by revolutionaries from El Salvador. And Central African Republic is a French neo-colony. That's where when the US overthrew the government of Aristide, they put him on an airplane and took him where? To the French African Republic. So it is a neo-colony. And Ethiopia is one of the forces that's most prominently being used right now by the Americans to make war in parts of Africa. So we're not surprised by that. And Africa has to be liberated. That's part of our struggle, is to liberate all of Africa. And the same forces who claim that they hate Russia because they say Russia somehow invaded Ukraine. It's not only its neighbor, but a country with a historical relationship to Russia. The Americas can't claim any historical relationship to Ethiopia. That's not its relationship. The French can't claim any historical relationship to the Central African Republic. It's not its neighbor or anything like that. They are there in those places because of colonialism. And so if anybody is to be condemned, it is the French, it's the Americans, it's the colonial powers who dominate Africa today. And they want to continue to dominate the world. And that's why Putin and Russia is a problem, because Putin and Russia stands in their way of complete, total world domination along with China.
Uhuru, Chairman. And thank you, President Alex. So we're going to go ahead and move this discussion, and we want to bring on some of our other panelists, Comrade Secretary General of the African Socialist International, Secretary General Luwezi Kinshasa, as well as the ASI Africa Regional Director, Comrade Tafarie Mugeri. And for this next question, we are actually going to be, this was a great segue, because many African countries in the United Nations didn't vote in favor of condemning Russia, and that is true for other colonized countries. And we want to ask, why do you think this is happening? Do you believe that Russia's presence in Africa helped create resentment against imperialists such as France and Europe? And do you have any examples of this? So Comrade Secretary General Luwezi Kinshasa and Director Tafarie, please join us for this discussion and speaking to this particular question.
From London and from South Africa.
Yes, we're Chairman, Comrade Alexander. So it's just a great honor just to be part of this discussion. Regarding this question, why African countries voted against, didn't join basically the United States in voting against Russia. In Africa, people are really upset with the role played by the United States and France and Britain in overthrowing the government of Gaddafi. You have to be aware that many Africans from the region used to work in Libya, where they used to get a better salary than they would get in their own countries, because the economy of Libya was relatively developed compared to the economy of most of those countries. And also, they remember Gaddafi was driving an agenda to unify Africa from the top, because we believe in uniting Africa from below, in a revolutionary way. But Gaddafi was trying to get a united Africa, to have a united economy, to have a new bank for development of Africa that will be based in Cameroon, in Yaoundé. And Gaddafi was paying a lot of bills for those different countries. And to see France, United States, under the leadership of Obama and Britain overthrowing Gaddafi, Africans are still upset about that today. So they hold those three countries, those three governments responsible for what's happening in Libya today, because what happened in Libya since the overthrow of Gaddafi's government and his assassination, that's also another matter. They also know, now there's evidence of it, that United States, France, Britain, they worked with the jihadists, terrorists, to not only to kill people in Libya, but to create chaos in the rest of Africa. You have organizations like ACME, which is linked to Al-Qaeda. You have Mugeri, which is linked to Islamic State. And they are creating chaos in Mali, in Burkina Faso, in Niger, in the region. So they hold these three colonial capitalist governments responsible for that. And it makes it difficult for Africans president to go in the UN and vote against Russia. So Africans are really, really clear on that. And also in Mali, France has been in Mali since 2012. They had two military operations, Operation Cerveau and Operation Barkhane. And the French say they're going there to help Africans fighting jihadists. But evidence has shown that the French are not fighting the jihadists. They're working with them. And the French are there to occupy the ground to protect their own interests, basically to control the minerals in Africa. They've seen African soldiers are being killed by proximity of French soldiers. They have seen the French using the cover, the air cover, not to bring peace there, but to protect the jihadists. People are really, really upset in Mali. So there has been a mobilization all over Mali, asking for France to take his army out of Mali. And which is the case now. The French are packing away. The Mali government has expelled the French ambassador. The Mali has just shut down the French propaganda. RFI and France 2024, they have done that. And another element that Africans are upset about, you're probably familiar with that, is the question of France domination of franc CFA. 14 countries in Africa, they have their currency dominated by France. France prints the money. France gets 65% every time there is a commercial operation. And France lend them their own money. It's just unbelievable in today to believe that France control the economy of Africa. And there is also the Central African Republic, where there is a Russian presence there. And Africans have seen France working with the rebel, killing civilians throughout Central African Republic. France trying to overthrow the government there because the government say France have been here for 60 years. There is no development. So we want to bring other partners so we can work with them. And they believe Russia is one of them. And if France will not accept that, they want to overthrow the government, and the Russian participation prevented the overthrow of that government. So there is no way that president was going to go to the UN and vote against Russia. There is no way the Malian government is going to go to the UN and vote against the Russian government. And most of the countries in the region, which have been destabilized by all these groups coming from Libya, or at least armed by French, the United States, and others, they were going to vote against Russia because the population is aware. They know why there is Boko Haram in Nigeria, why there is destabilization in Burkina Faso, in Mali, in Niger, in Mauritania, in Cameroon, throughout the regions. They know. They know is the colonizers. They know that. So the popular opinion is quite informed about that. So it's very difficult. And plus the information that every African now is saying openly that the slave ships didn't come from Russia. The Russians didn't put us slave ships. Africans saying that on the continent there. They're saying the Russian was not in the Berlin conference. They're saying the IMF and the World Bank are not from Russia. The IMF and the World Bank, they starved Africa, destroyed hospitals. I mean, they create chaos everywhere. So these are, of course, I remember the solidarity between, ex-Soviet Union with Angola, with Mozambique. People remember that. So it's really the talking, in a public place. People are talking about openly. So it made it difficult for this African president to go in the UN and say they are on the side of the US or France or Britain. No, they just can't say it. They can't do it like that. So these are some of the reasons the vote went that way. So I appreciate that. I say being this discussion.
So the same NATO that is right now attacking Russia through Ukraine also is a NATO that attacked Libya. that resulted in killing Gaddafi. And so that's a real history, and they can't make that go away. Uhuru.
Oh, definitely, Chairman, definitely.
Yes, Uhuru. Yeah, Uhuru, comrades. Yeah, I wanna firstly I wanna express appreciation for this program. I wanna salute Comrade Alexander from Russia. I wanna salute Chairman Omali Yeshitela, your profound leadership, and my direct leadership, SG Luwezi Kinshasa. And just to respond to the question, this speaking of the vote from the 2nd of March at the United Nations General Assembly, whereby 17 countries, African countries, decided to abstain from voting against Russia in Ukraine, and then you had about 28 countries voting against Russia, and one of those countries include Kagame's country, Rwanda. I just want to say something about that, because you have all these Pan-Africanists, even the Pan-Africanists can recognize that, they cannot take the stance with, those so-called radical Pan-Africanists cannot take a stance with US imperialism. So they sounding a bit disappointed. Oh, how could Kagame vote for, against Russia and stand with the imperialists and so forth? But then this is what we've been saying in the Uhuru movement, that Rwanda is a neo-colony, and Kagame is a neo-colonialist. So we are not surprised, and I just appreciate our political theory of African internationalism for putting us ahead like this. And that's why we are confident and bold in saying that we stand with Russia against US imperialism today, because we are informed by a political theory that's based on understanding the world as it is. So, and then I just want to say one thing, that is we want to overturn as the African People's Socialist Party, is that we are fighting for one Africa. We believe that African people, wherever we are in the world, are a nation. We are one nation. And then now when we talk about the vote that took place on the 2nd of March in the United Nations General Assembly, we're talking about 54 different positions. We are against that. Africa doesn't have to have all these 54 different positions, regarding Russia and Ukraine. Africa must have one position, because we are a nation, and we are like S.G. Luwezi was saying, that the general position in terms of the African masses everywhere you go is that African people cannot stand with US imperialism and Western imperialism against Russia, even just recognizing the history that we've had with Russia. So that's one thing that we were confident in that we want to overturn that. And also, I just want to make a quote from Sobukwe, who says that the future of Africa will be what Africans make it. African people now have to understand that we have to make Africa to be what it has to be. Because even these countries that are voting in the United Nations General Assembly are voting from a position of weakness, not from a position of power. That's why it's the backlash that they're receiving. And most of them right now, even after voting against Russia, they always have to justify why. And when they do that, it's the opinions are not like the sort of opinions that you will get on this platform with the Uhuru movement that exposes USA as an imperialist power with imperialist ambitions. But they will say things that, no, we don't want this thing to escalate, or maybe take a position that maybe there's not enough dialogue and so forth, discussion around the matter. But then our position is based on understanding the relationship we have with Western imperialism, and the relationship that we've had with Russia, and understanding what the chairman has referred to as the uneasy equilibrium. And I just want to say, part of the reason, and S.G. Luwezi, I just want to echo S.G. Luwezi, part of the reason that these how many 17 countries that voted that decided to abstain, they are not doing it, or they're not doing it because of a recognition of just to stand against imperialism openly, to say we're standing against imperialism. None of them have said that. They are doing that because they can read the atmosphere everywhere. You know, they can see that the US imperialism is not as powerful as it used to be. They can see the decline. They can see that the US imperialism is weakening. You know, that's why they can take the stance that they're taking right now. So, you know, there's a shift in the balance of power. And even the neo-colonialists can see that because they fight for their own selfish interest, you know. So I just want to also be able to highlight that as well, and say that but part of what needs to happen in Africa, actually the main thing that needs to happen is that Africa should we need to consolidate the United States of Africa, a unified Africa, so that, you know, African people who have a common interest wherever we are can begin to take one position, and that position will be a position that speaks to the interest of African people and to the interest of, you know, all humanity against U.S. imperialism, and for the self-determination of all the people in the world. And right now, even speaking about self-determination, the assumption that Russia, you know, is interfering or compromising or affecting the self-determination of the Ukrainian people. But what about imperialism? You know, Africa is 54 Africas right now because of European invasion and undermining the self-determination and sovereignty of Africa. Right now, even with the popular forces such as Patrice Lumumba, Kwame Nkrumah, all the revolutionaries that have been murdered and butchered by Western imperialism, that was really, you know, interfering with the process of the democratic process of Africa. You know, so they have fought up against democracy all over the world. So they don't have any moral ground to be able to say that, you know, Russia is really interfering with the is against democracy and so forth, when we know that, you know, US imperialism and Western imperialism have been the forces that have been fighting against democracy in the world. So yeah, Uhuru.
Well, comment Tafarie, and if I may, it's not just a moral question. Well, we're living in a world of, you know, its political and economic configurations were decided a long time ago of the whole colonial situation. And so the reason there's a North and a South Korea is because of colonialism. The reason that there is a Taiwan and Hong Kong that the US says China cannot have access to is because of colonialism. The reason that there are 54 different so-called countries in Africa, and Africans dispersed all around the world, is colonialism. The reason that Russians are separated from their own national home territory and land, their birth in Ukraine and other places, is because of colonialism. So the movement toward Russia in rectifying this relationship, if that was what it was, certainly Africa is going to be reunited. I don't give a damn about the French, the British, or the United States. Our objective is to unite Africa and African people globally. I know China is determined to unite Taiwan back with the rest of China, and Hong Kong, the rest of that. And so there is also a logical imperative for Russia to be united with Russian people. And despite what the colonizers have determined should be the case. So I just wanted to make that intervention as well. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman.
Uhuru. Comrades, I don't know if you guys have access to the channels we're streaming on, whether Facebook or YouTube, but I just want to say that everybody is really, really appreciating this discussion. So much positive, overwhelming support. You know, Russian flags saying, I stand with Russia. and, just saluting this profound analysis. So I just wanted to salute, all of our panelists thus far, and we will continue with this discussion. We're going to take a brief pause, give our panelists just a moment to collect their thoughts and breathe, while we give you just a few announcements, things going on within our movement. But don't go anywhere. We are continuing with this discussion. So let's go ahead and get through these announcements, because I know this is what you guys want to talk about. Our audience wants to engage in this discussion. So let's get through these announcements. All right. So following today's study, the Uhuru Solidarity Movement will host the final day of its annual national convention titled Unity Through Reparations, Reparations Through Organization. This convention will win white people to understand that their responsibility, their interests, and their future is found in the revolutionary anti-colonial struggle for reparations to African people. You can still join this online conference. For more information and to register, go to uhurusolidarity.org/register. So that's following today's Omali Taught Me Sunday study is the second and final day of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement's National Convention. So uhurusolidarity.org/register. The African National Women's Organization calls on Black women. Next. The African National Women's Organization calls on Black women and our supporters to attend the Black Women's Convention, March 25th to 27th, 2022. So that's next weekend. The Black Women's Convention is an annual gathering of working class Black women who believe that colonial capitalism must be destroyed in order for African women to be free. There's still time to register for this powerful conference. So go to convention.anwouhuru.org. It is virtual, so you can attend from wherever it is you are located. Go to convention.anwouhuru.org to register for the Black Women's Convention. Next. Subscribe to the Burning Spear TV on YouTube and donate to your favorite show, Omali Taught Me, at paypal.me/Omali Taught Me. We've been talking about, this whole media whiteout, especially in regards to the situation with Russia and Ukraine. And so we are a platform, we are offering our platform to Russia to be able to talk about what's happening on the ground. And, we continue to battle, this whiteout censorship as well, but we're calling on you to help support, build this show, build the audience. So subscribe to the Burning Spear TV on YouTube to make that happen. And lastly, next, for all of our movement events and announcement, visit the burningspear.com/events page, where you can see everything upcoming, because this was just a very brief list. So go to the burningspear.com/events to check out new events and announcements from the Uhuru movement. And that will conclude our announcement slides. And I just want to call on everybody, based on this discussion, that if you are united with what you're hearing and recognize that your responsibility as an African is to join the African Revolution, which is the only thing that is capable of destroying the colonial capitalist system, the only thing that will ensure a new world where African people have control over our Africa, over our resources, and we can work in our own interests, we have to join the African Revolution, make the revolution, destroy this colonial capitalist system, and replace it with the liberated, united, socialist Africa. So in order to do that, you have to join the vehicle that's responsible for making this happen, and that's the African People's Socialist Party. There is no other organization on the planet claiming to want to make a genuine African revolution. It is the African People's Socialist Party over the last 50 years, under the leadership of Chairman Omali Yeshitela, that has forwarded the leadership towards African redemption. So we're calling on you to claim Africa and take your responsibility in this fight, to join the struggle at APSPUhuru.org. Go to APSPUhuru.org, fill out our contact form, join the African Revolution. The time is right now. So APSPUhuru.org, join this struggle. And I just wanted to make that as part of our final announcement. So we're coming back, and we have on the panel with us, if you are just tuning in, Chairman Omali Yeshitela, President Alexander Ionov of the Anti-Globalization Movement of Russia, the African Socialist International Secretary General Luwezi Kinshasa, and our African Regional Director of Organization, Comrade Tafarie Mugeri. So, Comrade President Alexander, we want to ask this.
May I just ask a question? Yeah, Tasha.
Yes.
Tasha, when I was there in Moscow, I met a woman who I think represented an organization of Ukrainian mothers. This was in 2015 or 2016. Would you be aware of what I'm talking about?
Да, я слушаю, помню ее, да.
Yes, I remember her.
Could you, if you could send us the information, contact information, I would like to, for us to be able to contact those women and see what kind of unity we can establish with those women and the African National Women's Organization that we participate with here and in Africa.
Пришли нам, пожалуйста, их контактную информацию, чтобы мы соединили их, связали с Организацией по защите прав африканских женщин.
Okay. I do this.
Thank you.
Uhuru.
Akile.
Uhuru. Thank you, Chairman. Yes, so current President Alex, we wanted to ask this question to you, but all of the questions are open to every panelist, so don't feel restricted. But current President, can you address the presence of Nazis within the Ukrainian government and amongst the people of Ukraine? President Putin described wanting to denazify the country during this war, so wanting you to speak to the presence of Nazis within the Ukrainian government. And you've mentioned this in brief before.
Значит, президент Путин сказал о том, что проведет денацификацию Украины, а ты нам сказал, что среди украинского руководства и среди народа Украины есть много нацистов. Как-то поподробнее это можешь объяснить эту тему?
Когда был Майдан, многие люди, которые туда вышли, кто-то действительно хотел поменять власть, но большинство тех, кто туда вышел, они получали за это деньги. И через какое-то время они могли уйти с Майдана и не добиться смены власти, того, чего хотели в Европе и в США. И их окружили и держали на Майдане националисты. И поэтому националисты, которые на западе Украины жили всегда и были против всего российского и считали себя частью Польши и других стран, они были всегда в авангарде украинской власти. И с момента революции на Майдане националисты, Парубий и прочие же с ним сволочи стали занимать официальные должности в руководстве страны.
Well, the thing is, during 2014 events, most protesters in the squares of Kiev, squares of Ukraine, well, they came there to protest against power, but they were paid by American authorities. But they were paid according to this deal. So like you get paid now, but after a while of protest, you can leave. So what actually happened is that they were surrounded by Ukrainian nationalists who would not let them leave. And that gave them the edge, kind of position of force. So whenever regime change occurred, they captured the power in Ukraine, these ultra-nationalist forces, and, well, basically, they brought the most, hateful, the most radical elements into the power, into this parliament of Ukraine, and gave them ultimate power.
И самое главное, что до того, как эти националисты начали свою активность, есть еще исторический фактор.
There is another important historical factor here.
На западе Украины во время Второй мировой войны, во время оккупации Германии части земель Советского Союза, были созданы батальоны Waffen-СС из числа стран Прибалтики и Западной Украины. И американцы очень активно, прошу прощения, американцы, а немцы очень активно вкачивали деньги в своего агента Степана Бандера. И Бандера создал ультранационалистическое движение, ветераны которого сегодня считаются очень уважаемыми людьми на Украине и проводят свои марши на Западе и в центре страны, в частности в Киеве. То есть это те люди, кто воевал против Советского Союза. Это агенты Гитлера.
During the Great Patriotic War here, there's some lands of Ukraine, Eastern Ukraine, Western Ukraine were occupied by Hitler, and his forces made there some kind of battalions, like military units consisting of local population, and they were led by the guy called Bandera, and that person led anti-Soviet war there. So the people you see now who are fighting Russia in Ukraine, basically they are, they consider these as their forefathers. You know, like this Nazi Ukrainians that were yesterday were killing Ukrainians in Russia for Hitler. Right now they are like heroes in modern Ukraine.
И нужно понимать, что Украины до 1917 года как государства не существовало. Украину создал Ленин.
You should also understand that Ukraine did not exist exactly before 1917. It was created by Lenin.
В 1922 году для удобства управления он создал одну административную область.
In 1922, in order to be able to direct it better, he created one administrative area.
Так как шла гражданская война с белым движением,
since there was war against this white army,
и нужно было управлять этой территорией, поэтому объединили в одну административную единицу.
And this territory had to be managed somehow, so he made this like single administrative unit.
Позже она получила название Украинская ССР.
Later it's been renamed to Ukraine SSSR.
До этого она называлась в империи, она называлась Малороссия, Малая Россия, Little Russia.
During Russian Empire, before Soviets, it was named Malorossia, loosely translated like small Russia.
Поэтому там веками живут русские.
So for centuries, Russians are living there.
И после распада Советского Союза получилась Украина, где на протяжении многих лет благодаря Западу финансировалось националистическое движение.
And since collapse of Soviet Union, for many years we have witnessed how West is sponsoring nationalistic movements there.
В России есть такое выражение.
In Russia there is an expression.
Сначала мы пытаемся очень долго разговаривать.
First, we try to talk for a really long time.
Но когда разговаривать уже не с кем,
when we have no one to talk to,
и люди отказываются от диалога,
and people are refusing dialogue.
Начинают говорить наши пушки.
Our guns are beginning to talk for us.
И получилось, что, к сожалению, сегодня Россия воюет с НАТО.
So, to my deepest regret, today we see Russia is fighting NATO.
И сегодня мы последняя страна, которая противостоит натовской агрессии.
Today we are probably the last country or last one in the list who is standing in the face of NATO expansion, NATO aggression.
Мы сильная страна.
We are a strong country.
И мы не дадим в обиду нашу память людей, которые воевали против фашизма. И мы не дадим НАТО развалить Россию так, как они развалили Советский Союз.
We will not let NATO destroy the memory of our fathers who fought Nazi Germany. We will not let NATO destroy Russia as they destroyed Soviet Union.
До этого за 8 лет погибло 14 тысяч человек на Донбассе.
Before today, for last 8 years, around 14,000 people died in Donbass.
И мы не можем позволить себе забыть о них.
We cannot allow ourselves to forget them.
Как и о тех людях, которые в результате сегрегации пострадали в Африке, в Латинской Америке, в Азии и других странах.
Just as we cannot forget the people who suffered segregation in Africa, in Latin America, in Asia, and other countries.
И если сегодня кто-то из левого движения подойдет к вам и скажет, что вы не правы, поддерживая Россию, плюньте им в лицо. Они не представители левого движения.
And if somebody from so-called left movement comes to you today and say you are wrong supporting Russia, I suggest you to spit in their face, because they do not, they are not left movement.
Потому что они предают идеалы тех людей, которые боролись за рабочее движение, боролись за интернационализм, и они предают идеалы тех людей, которые помогали Мозамбику, Анголе и другим африканским странам обрести независимость.
Because they betray the memory of people who fought for the working class. They betray the memory of people who fought for Angola, Mozambique, and other African countries to become independent.
Я общаюсь с очень многими африканскими президентами и государственными деятелями сейчас.
I'm talking to many African leaders these days.
И 90% из них ждут русскую армию у себя и русских.
90% of them, as they tell me, said we are waiting for Russian army to come here to help us.
Ни одна африканская страна не ввела санкции в отношении России.
There is no single African country who would make sanctions against Russia.
Даже самые бедные страны готовы нам помочь в нашей борьбе.
Even poorest countries are ready to help us in our fight.
Это значит, что люди понимают.
That means people understand.
Люди понимают, кто создал Боко-Харам, террористическую организацию.
Who created this terrorist organization of Boko Haram.
Кто разделил Сомали.
People understand who divided Somali.
Люди понимают, кто разделил Судан.
They understand who divided Sudan.
кто дальше продолжает эксплуатировать африканцев и не хочет, чтобы там наступило, наконец, нормальное время, когда страны начнут развиваться.
People understand who up now exploits African people and would not let them start developing.
2 года назад в Сочи, в России, прошел форум президентов африканских стран.
Before 2 years in Sochi, there was a conference for African countries.
Все президенты африканских стран прилетели в Россию.
All presidents of African countries came to Russia.
Я был на этом форуме.
I visited that forum.
И я не видел там ни одного человека,
I didn't saw one person there
который бы сказал что-то хорошее в отношении США,
who will say something good about United States
и плохо в отношении Китая и России.
but will say bad something about Russia or China.
Все говорили о том, что они устали от работы с европейскими и американскими компаниями.
Everyone was saying the same thing. We are tired of slaving for European and American companies.
Поэтому Россия – это тот ледокол, тот ледоруб, о который разобьются все идеи американцев властвовать в Африке, Азии и европейской части нашей страны, Восточной Европы.
Russia is that ice peak. It's that icebreaker that will crush this American dreams to continue ruling Africa and Asia and European Russia.
А если они не верят, пусть выкопают Троцкого, он подтвердит.
And if they don't believe it, let them dig up Trotsky and he will confirm my word.
Я прошу глубочайшего прощения, мне нужно будет через 5 минут отключиться. У меня уже 2 журналиста ждут на линии, чтобы взять интервью из Франции. Это очень важно, чтобы я мог выступить перед европейскими слушателями и донести нашу позицию.
Now, I'm really sorry, but in 5 minutes I should go. I have interview with with French journalists. I should deliver to them our position. It's very important.
Uhuru. Tasha, I want to really express appreciation for your participation here. And I'm calling on everyone who is viewing this discussion to indicate by going to apspuhuru.org and indicating your unity with participating in a political action in support of Russia. We can speak more about what that will look like in the coming days, but we want to be able to take a stance because the solidarity that we've seen, especially in the United States, is paper thin. And most Africans who indicate some kind of support for Russia, they've done it without being able to hear from Russia because the US has made it impossible for any opposing views to be heard. And even before Russia, we know how Facebook and other social media entities have prevented us from being able to have discussions about our conditions in the world as African people. We've been banned, that is to say, not just this movement, but this is a common story of African people everywhere. So indicate your unity with being able to take some kind of collective action and that we are looking forward to doing, because we believe that that it's not good enough just to say peace, that we have to say victory to the oppressed. And that's the genuine stance, revolutionary stance we think is absolutely necessary. I want to thank you, Tasha, for being with us on today. Uhuru.
Thank you so much, Comrade Omali. I'm really appreciated for members of this Zoom conference, and I really believe we win, and I really waiting to support your movement to Russian citizens. If you have the activists, go to the streets and say about what's happened to Russia, what's happened to Ukraine, what's happened to really now for this conflict. It's very important. All free people around the world must know what's happened really, what's happened about the Russian NATO wars, what's happened to the African people who stay with Russia, what's happened to the Latin American people who stay in Russia, what's happened to the Chinese people who stay in Russia. Now we new international movement, we new international. Thank you, Uhuru, and bye-bye. We win.
Uhuru, we're winning, comrade. Uhuru, we're winning.
Uhuru, thank you, President Alex. And so we are, towards, we are at the end of our program, but I know we have to go just a couple of minutes over. I want to give the opportunity for Secretary General Luwezi, Director Tafarie, for brief closing statements, and then Chairman, we'll turn it over to you to close. And I'll indicate some things that I hope you mention for those closing remarks. But Comrade S.G. Luwezi and Director Tafarie.
Yes, well, I just want to say it's just a really great privilege, great honor just to be part of this discussion. And I know the chairman said that before in one of those meetings. We have the responsibility to really inform the world how they should refer to what to countries like the United States and France and the rest of them. They are the colonizers because they kept saying they are the free world. No. They are the colonizers, preventing the vast majority of the people of the world to be free. So we really have to defeat that definition that they have given themselves. And when we talk about like Libya, where are the $200 billion they stole from the Libyan asset? They're freezing Russian asset. How much money is it? But they are the colonizers. They are the ones stealing everybody's resources. 200 billions of Libyan assets. Where are they? And Africans have no right to join the colonizers in Ukraine to fight for the colonizers. We already shed our blood a lot of times. We died to fight the Nazi. In France, in Europe, many Africans shed their blood. The only legitimate war is war to free Africa, to unify African nation, to unite the black people all over the world and build black power. That's the only legitimate war. There is no other legitimate war. So we have to be united around that. So this is in conclusion what I want to say, that I unite. We are winning. We are winning. We're
So it looks like, okay. Might be a little bit.
Yeshitela, and the work that you've been doing with this project director Akile. I want to salute S.G. Luwezi, of course, and Alex. Just want to say many governments out there, we saw that even in terms of voting at that, what UN General Assembly on the 2nd of March, a lot of countries did vote against Russia, but the people in those countries, you see that a lot of them suffer from the consequence of US imperialism, US aggression, they suffer from that. The people who are in Rwanda, the people in terms of Africa, right there. We saw the colonial powers done to us. Just because a government of whatever country that you are, implant in, takes a stance, like with imperialism, doesn't mean that we have to take that stance. Those governments, we have to know our interest, and our interest lies in a future that is shorn of imperialism. So whenever imperialism is in crisis, we have to, to contribute, to stand against imperialism and actually to work and join this revolutionary movement, to fighting for the total liberation of Africa and African people everywhere. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Comrade Director Tafarie, thank you. Thank you to Secretary General Luwezi Kinshasa. And now, Chairman, we are going to go ahead and move to close. And I'll ask you this last question as you wrap up, but you made recently like a profound type of statement regarding, what we would say to those who are concerned about the people in Ukraine and what actions can the people of Ukraine take, to be on the right side of this question. So as you close, if you could speak to that as well, Chairman.
Well, thank you, Comrade Director Keeley. First, I want to really unite with Comrade Tafarie in recognizing the tremendous job you've done in terms of presiding over this extraordinarily well done webinar, that we've been engaged in, this discussion. And of course, we're not unsympathetic to the people of Ukraine. We call on the people of Ukraine to do the very same thing that we call on people any place who live under oppressive conditions and circumstances. You want to stop this war, we want to stop too. And the thing that you have to do is to unite. You have to unite together to overthrow that reactionary government that is responsible for all the death and mayhem that is happening in Ukraine today. And that is the government of Zelensky. That has turned Ukraine into a kind of forward military outpost of US and colonial aggression against Russia. And this is a war that it has been involved in for something like 100 years or more. And that Ukraine will not find a future by joining with the other colonizers, expecting that you will be able to live like the other white people of the world off the blood and sweat and resources of Africa and the oppressed of the world. Because we are the ones that ultimately you're going to have to fight. All of the imperialist powers are going to have to deal with the fact that the people who live under colonial domination refuse to do that. And they're not going to get any stronger as by your joining on that side. You've joined a losing team. So I would call on you in the interest of, in your own self-interest, the interest of peace in the world, is to overturn that rotten, foul government, turn your guns against Zelensky and those criminals that occupy that space of leadership in Ukraine today. So that's what I would suggest to you, because the freedom of the oppressed people of the world is definitely coming. We are winning, and the evidence of that is to be seen in the death of a crisis of this social system that would actually have this attack being made against Russia, using you as a means to do that. So having said that, Comrade Director, I just want to say uhuru, and I'm sorry we didn't have an opportunity to hear where people are around the world who participating in this discussion. But I know we are moving from here into another really important international conference that we are involved in as well. Thank you so much, comrade. Thank all of you comrades who have come on to this discussion. And I guarantee you that it's not over yet. I hope again that you will indicate your willingness to participate in some kind of action. I'm hoping, especially if you're on the West Coast of the United States, to let us know your willingness to participate in any kind of action expressing our solidarity with Russia against this belligerent colonial power that's attempting to destroy Russia as a bulwark against growing desperate attempts by colonialism to strangle the peoples of the world. Uhuru.
Uhuru, Chairman.
Vanguard up, comrades. Uhuru.
Chairman, Vanguard up. And I just want to say this has been yet another profound discussion around this situation. It is our responsibility to combat the imperialist lies espoused by the colonial powers. We have to fight the monopoly they have on narrative distribution, and these studies have been a part of that struggle. So thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure you like and follow the chairman on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and subscribe to the Burning Spear TV on YouTube to catch every episode of the Omali Taught Me Sunday Study. Build the African Revolution, Vanguard up, Uhuru.